Your comfort zone is lying to you every single day. Want to build a tougher brain and a stronger life? Then do something that sucks and do it on purpose.
So your topic today is to do something that sucks every day.
Yeah.
That sounds miserable.
Yeah. I think we kind of adhered towards we talked a lot about comfort culture. That's kind of where it comes from, is where we tend to be conditioned towards not doing things that are difficult, and then we try to gravitate towards things that are easy or comfortable. But I do a lot of reading and research on this whole concept of self-discipline, which I think a lot of us lack. We all lack it to some degree or another. And so that's where it kind of came from. And then I read a piece from a book about self-discipline that really talked a lot about, really what all self-discipline is something that sucks every day. And doing the things that are uncomfortable, regardless of how uncomfortable they are, better you in some way or another. And that's all related to delayed gratification, which is becoming a skill that is less and less common.
Yeah.
Modern society.
I feel that, I know I used to be very disciplined in a lot of areas of my personal life, but then, time and again, I find myself kind of falling on the wayside with that discipline. And it kind of bothers me because I'm like, I know that personal discipline and doing something that sucks every day is actually, it can be good for you. But then but like, why is it so hard for us to do the things that are good for you?
So the question,
Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself.
Well, the other way to ask it is, why would anyone do something unpleasant every single day?
Yeah. Why would someone do something unpleasant every day?
Yeah. If you have an alternative that's not unpleasant, why wouldn't you just choose that one? Well, the actual, and so as you know me, I'm fascinated by neuropsychology, how our brains work.
Yeah.
And so it actually turns out, excuse me, if you do something unpleasant every day, your brain will actually thank you for it in a roundabout way.
How so?
That's kind of what we're talking about too.
Okay. All right.
Settle down.
Chill out, John. Chill out. Relax.
Gratification, John. It's delayed gratification. You don't need it all right now.
Good point. I want it now but I want it now without. I want the reward without the hard work.
Yeah. So let's just kind of start with talking about things that are intentionally difficult that people have taken. One of the one that comes to mind, these polar plunges. Have you done a polar plunge?
Have I done one?
Yeah.
I did one
in the middle of winter. No. Yeah, the polar plunge in the middle of winter.
Well, not when they come
in the lake.
Jumping. The closest I've ever gotten to that, Josh, was jumping into a lake way up north at a retreat at the end of October.
Yeah.
So there was no freezing ice or whatever. The lakes were not frozen over, but it was reeking cold, and I felt so alive.
And there's the research has found that from a neuropsychological standpoint, that there's actually some benefit to to conditioning your brain to be able to do hard things, because we have this natural resistance to doing things that we perceive as being very difficult. Is the act of jumping into the frozen lake, the actual act of doing that difficult? No, but it's the consequence of doing that that's hard for us to overcome. And so we see a lot of people, there's kind of these trends, and a common trend is ice baths. Well, ice baths are completely uncomfortable for a lot of us, our Western culture, when we're used to water heaters. But we do them anyway. We find that there's health benefits to it. But it's kind of getting over that hump of resistance to doing something unpleasant that a lot of us find challenging. Mm-hmm. So today I thought we'd talk a bit about, how do we do something that sucks every single day? Because really, if we're able to do hard things and delay our gratification in the moment, we're going to find greater success in our life. And a lot of times that the struggle that we face, we're faced with the fork in the road vision. We can either do the easy thing for temporary enjoyment or temporary comfort or temporary pleasure. Or we can choose to do the hard thing and delay comfort and enjoyment for a period of time to achieve our greater goals. And so that's kind of what I thought would be a good idea to talk about today. So there's going to be kind of 4 areas that we focus on. The first one is, in order to kind of do something that sucks every day, we need to first understand why our brains resist discomfort in the first place. We consciously know that doing hard things will get us places in life and get us the goals or the rewards that we want. But for whatever reason, most of us still operate on that pleasure principle, which is we do things because they're enjoyable in the moment, and then we don't do the things that are difficult that'll actually achieve our long-term success. So we're looking at why our brains resist discomfort, and then we're going to talk a bit about what happens actually in our brain when we face those challenges and actually follow through on doing the difficult things. And then we'll talk about the long-term benefits of what I call practicing discomfort or practice discomfort. And then we'll talk about how to implement them in our lives. And I'm not a sadistical guy. So people are going to wonder, why would anybody want to practice discomfort? But we'll get to that.
So this is going to be good for me because I have definitely fallen into the seek pleasure first mindset and avoid discomfort at all costs. I mean, not really at all costs. I mean, I do the hard things that I enjoy, but the things that are important that actually will truly move me forward as a person and as a parent. And
The things that suck.
the things that suck. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I don't want to do them.
Yeah. So let's talk about, why does your brain resist discomfort? And first of all, you're not alone. We all resist discomfort, the baseline, and you never gonna get to a spot where you completely are okay with it. It's just you get better at ignoring the internal resistance that automatically pops up.
You're more in control.
Yeah. We can look at it from an evolutionary psychology standpoint, and we, obviously, regardless of your thoughts on evolution, but the human brain, we can talk about the developmental psychology. Our human brains, or human beings in general, have been developed to do several things. And I talked about before, is our brain's goal is to keep us alive. That is its baseline task, is to keep the human body alive and to protect it and keep it safe. So it's been developed to, 1, conserve energy, 2, avoid risk, and then 3, to seek safety and enjoyment and pleasure. So you can kind of see how anything that's discomfort or difficult is completely opposed to all those baseline functions that our brain has. And so that's why you have that internal resistance. There's a brain structure in our minds, or in our brain, called the amygdala. And that brain structure is responsible for detecting threats in our environment. And certainly when we think of threats, we tend to think of, well, somebody running after me with a knife, or being in danger of great bodily harm. But the amygdala looks for any kind of threat to conserving energy, avoiding risk, or pleasure. Okay. Anything that's opposed to those things, the amygdala is going to perceive as a threat. And then that in turn triggers the fear response. What is the fear response? There's flight or fight, correct? When we have a threat in our environment, we can do 2 things. We can either fight, or we can run from it. Right. And our brain applies those things to, again, not just great bodily harm situations, but smaller situations that are unpleasant. It goes against the brain's tendency to seek for things that give us enjoyment and comfort rather than discomfort.
Do you think always seeking out pleasure and avoiding the hard, avoiding the things that suck every day, do you think that's a flight response?
I think it's both, to be honest with you. You could look at it through either lens. It's running away from the situation or the stimulus, you could say, that's not enjoyable.
Right.
Or it's fighting against it too. Our brain's also fighting against our desire to want to do difficult things in order to achieve our goals, because doing the difficult things is not comfortable. And therefore we fight against that internally.
Ooh.
So it's kind of both. You can kind of apply either one.
Oh gosh. Yeah. So you're kind of always, so when you're, so in I guess if you look at it in some ways, if you are actively avoiding doing the hard things, you're always in fight or flight mode. In some ways,
Your brain is always.
so while you're prioritizing pleasure, you're probably so at least in my case, when I know I'm doing something pleasurable or recreational, and I'm like, I really need to get something done for work or do something I don't want to do at home. In my mind, and I have that nagging feeling like I know I need to do this. I really don't want to. So it's kind of like, to me, it's almost like you're always in kind of a fight or flight mode.
Well, in a way, I mean, it's your body just doing its job. Your body's job is to keep you safe, keep you comfortable, keep a roof over your head, keep your belly full, all those things. And so it's a natural tendency for your body to gravitate towards things that are comfortable and away from things that are not.
Why do you think we're kind of getting off topic, but why do you think if you believe in the evolution theory or whatever, but our bodies adapt to our current situations. I mean, way back when, caveman days.
Yep.
It was truly legitimately, are you going to die today, or are you going to bring home the bacon?
Right.
Now it's, watch one more episode.
Are you going to read 10 pages or watch another episode?
Right, exactly. So why do you think our brains or amygdalas haven't adapted to? It just seems like they haven't really adapted to what our current. I don't know if that makes sense.
It has, because we know we're not going to die if we watch Netflix and read 10 pages like we had agreed in our goals. But it's still gravitating towards this idea of homeostasis. And the further back you go on your brain, on the brain stem, that's a very primitive part of our brain. The brain stems, I'll spare you the details, but the whole reason for the brain stem is to keep our bodies alive and to keep our functions moving and safe and functioning correctly. And so that part of the brain is always going to operate that way. Stop doing what it's doing, just differently, obviously. But the brain likes this idea of homeostasis. And what is that? That is just, the brain likes predictability and minimal stress. So anything that the brain can find that will move towards predictability and lowering stress level, that's what it's going to want to do. And that's what we're going to want to do, is naturally gravitate towards that. And so there's always going to be that natural resistance to doing the difficult things, because especially in our culture, doing the easy thing is always right there.
So
Netflix is just a press of a button away. And so it's very easy to continue doing the minimal stress things. It's just so easy to consume it.
I think that the instant gratification. I know I'm kind of going off on tangents here, but I almost wonder if Amazon was like the biggest player to that instant gratification with the Prime. And the 1 and 2 day shipping, like that was never. I mean, I remember we would wait for a week, 2 weeks to receive anything that we order online or in the mail. And is it going to show up? I don't know. And now it's like, if it's not here the next day, you ticked off.
Well, I think it's just more, all of the above, the Amazon culture, where you click a button and magically 2 days later, the object appears on your doorstep.
And I don't have to think of where it gives you that.
Or we can now watch all of our favorite TV shows without a single commercial interruption, if you pay for the right plan, of course. So we've even grown to not be able to tolerate a commercial break, whereas before streaming and whatnot, you'd use those commercial breaks to run to the bathroom, grab a snack, and get back to couch in time. But now if we have a commercial, we're terribly inconvenienced by it most of the time.
Gosh, we become so soft.
Yeah.
Soft.
We become so comfortable.
Yeah, so comfortable.
So all that, just kind of lends itself to toward the comfort culture, is we are always seeking comfort, and we have a less and less tolerance for being uncomfortable. And when we are uncomfortable, we have a hard time sitting in it for a little while. Even though discomfort should be a normal part of our human existence. There's been some research that into what we call avoidance learning, both in rats and in humans. And to avoid you with boring the details, what the research found is that avoiding discomfort in the moment actually feels very rewarding, because it feels like we've accomplished something,
Yeah.
rather than doing the hard thing that's uncomfortable. I'm doing this more comfortable thing, and that kind of fires our brain up to reward itself. So avoiding discomfort definitely feels rewarding in the moment, the research shows, but actually limits our growth over time. As we talked about before, our brain is very plastic, which means it's very adaptable, and it is constantly learning. What we find is if we avoid all discomfort or all uncomfortable situations, or avoid doing the difficult thing, or avoid doing the thing that sucks every day, it actually limits our growth, our brain's ability to grow and change over time. And so it we're left with a situation in which our brains tend to become static. If our only goal in life is to seek out comfort rather than do a difficult thing. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Our brain is going to naturally resist discomfort. And it's important to know that no matter how much you practice doing the hard things, we're always going to have some internal resistance. You can just get better at it, though. On the flip side, I think it's important to also understand, what happens in the brain when we face discomfort, though. What happens in the brain when we get over that hump, and, for lack of better terms, kind of fight through it? What we find is that initially, when we have acute stress, there is an internal brain system called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Okay, I'm not going to repeat that.
Just a long one.
HPA. That essentially causes our cortisol spike, and we all know cortisol is a stress hormone. But that's kind of what builds our internal resistance to things. But when you override that avoidance impulse caused by that, it causes your prefrontal cortex to activate. So if you can kind of follow me here, our cortisol spikes in the back of our head, in our brainstem area. But when we overcome that avoidance impulse, prefrontal cortex activates. And our prefrontal cortex is located in the front of our brain and is responsible for all of our natural thoughts. So that's why, as we're talking here, we've been talking about we fight discomfort, but at the same time, we know we should go through discomfort. And that's kind of your prefrontal cortex is fighting against the brainstem.
Yeah. Wow.
So when we override those avoidance impulses, or get over that hump, so to speak, of doing difficult things, it overrides that avoidance impulse and activates our prefrontal cortex, which in turn improves our ability to self-regulate when we're experiencing emotional distress or discomfort.
So the HPA, whatever,
Sure.
the spikes, that's like the animal part of your brain.
Sure. Yeah.
And this part is the more rational part.
Right.
Right. And guys, you got to stop letting the animal take over.
Right. Well, and this is not to say that we should go be doing dangerous things or things that threaten our life.
But to do things that challenge you.
The idea of mild stress. Really, when we're talking about doing difficult things, whether it's I want to read 10 pages a day or I want to journal once a day, those aren't really high stress situations. They're just difficult choices in the moment. We call that mild stress, right? Because you're faced with a decision. You can either go be comfortable or you can go do the difficult thing in the moment. What we find is that the research shows that mild stress in controlled doses actually promotes growth in our brain. There's neurons in our brain. There's these parts of those cells called dendrite that actually strengthen connections, interconnectivity in our brain. And that actually, when we have mild stress and doing difficult things, it actually promotes that growth. And then which in turn improves our cognitive flexibility. So it kind of helps our brain develop neuroplasticity.
Interesting. Okay.
So for example, let's just look at, because I'm kind of a geek when it comes to this stuff, or a nerd, you could say. I always like to delve into the research, and some of the research we find is that, for example, there's been some meditation and cold exposure studies that have shown increased resilience and dopamine response when you engage in meditation, for example, on a regular basis, or when you do cold exposure. When I'm talking cold exposure, I'm talking about people that take cold showers or cold plunge.
Well, I took a cold shower this morning, Joe. I did. I was a little bit tired of that. I thought, you know what? I'm trying to keep it on cold. I'll shower.
I did not take a cold shower this morning. I took a very comfortable warm shower.
But you worked out.
Actually, I didn't. Oh, you did. That's morning.
You're out. You're off, day.
I'm going for a run this afternoon.
Hey, there you go. I'll see. Make up for it then.
But to kind of echo the point is the research shows that this kind of what we call it controlled exposure to mild discomfort actually improves our ability to emotionally regulate ourselves. And why is that? It's because if we do the difficult thing or the thing that sucks it improves our brain's ability to regulate the discomfort or the uncomfortable emotions that we experience in response to those things. And it learns to tolerate, I don't really feel comfortable right now, or I don't really like this, but I'm doing it anyway. Right. So it improves our ability to emotionally regulate ourselves. And that obviously can translate into a lot of different areas in our lives to do the difficult things.
I've heard a statement many times. I do think there's some truth to it, but I've heard that what you feed on, you crave.
Yeah.
Like even if you don't like doing the hard thing, if you just do a little bit every day consistently, even when you really don't want to write the 5-minute journal entry, it's 5 minutes, guys.
Yeah,
it's 5 minutes. But just doing that little thing, it feels so good.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take any time, but then it kind of builds up on it. Then you start to look forward to those activities.
Right. Because it becomes, we call it it's become internalized, and it's also been habituated.
Because I used to meditate every single day, morning and night. And sometimes 3 times a day. I had some, as you know, I had some health related stuff that I need to work through. And when I was doing that, it was a big time investment, and I didn't want to do it. And well, at first I had to do it because it was kind of my only option at the point for what I was going through.
Right.
But then I started to genuinely look forward to it, even though, was I taking time away from potentially watching a show or doing something more active that I would prefer to do? Yeah. But I actually came to actually crave the meditation because of how much it benefited my life.
Well, it's rewarding. There's a reward at the end. And that's kind of like a microcosm of goal achievement. It's anything worth doing typically requires doing something uncomfortable. And meditation, for example, is uncomfortable, especially in our fast-paced society. We are geared towards constantly receiving feedback. And meditation forces you to sit with yourself and not get any feedback from any source whatsoever for a period of time. Very, very difficult to do if you're not practiced in it. But at the other end of that, it's very rewarding. And so that's why you're not craving the actual experience necessarily, you're craving the end result.
Right.
And that's kind of how our brain gets to a point where it can tolerate being uncomfortable for a period of time because it understands that at the end of the benefit. Okay. So you kind of led into my next point, and that is, what are the long-term benefits of practicing discomfort? It's all well and good. You're saying, Josh, to do something that sucks every day, but really, what's the point of it? The first one I would say is, I believe for a while now that we don't have a whole lot of psychological resilience in our culture nowadays.
Yeah, that's true.
We're very quick to be offended, regardless of what political side you're on, for example. But I'm just speaking, generally speaking, as a general whole, our population, our culture, quick to be offended. We always are talking about being triggered by different things. So the idea of practicing discomfort or doing the difficult things or doing one thing that sucks, teaches us and forces us to tolerate stress without emotional overwhelm. If we are able to practice discomfort and geared towards achieving a goal, it not only brings us toward reaching that goal, but it also has a secondary benefit, teaching ourselves to tolerate stress without being emotionally overwhelmed. And that obviously can translate to a whole lot of different situations in our lives, whether it's relationships, interacting with others, work. It all has a great, that piece of psychological resistance, which I feel a lot of us in society are missing, is that ability to be resilient in the face of difficulty. Obviously, practicing discomfort also increases confidence. We've heard time and again that when people have, quote, arrived, so to speak, and get to the end of their lives and no longer have to work because they've achieved their retirement goals and whatnot, consistently people will tell you that, if I'm not doing anything, I actually get quite depressed. If all we do is sit around and watch TV or go fishing all day, yeah, it's good for a period of time. But if you spend years doing that, you feel very unfulfilled. It's because you lack then the confidence of doing something productive. Yeah. So practicing that discomfort on a daily basis, whether it's at your work or in your personal life, doing things that are productive, results in obviously proving to yourself that you can handle hard things, right? Which in turn gives you a reward. Sure. What I also found interesting is doing the difficult things. We already talked about neuroplasticity a few minutes ago. Yeah. Doing the difficult things on a daily basis has actually been found to increase learning and memory. So really, it improves our brain's capacity to learn and then to recall information. And the reason for that is because you're stimulating your brain and you're kind of putting stress onto your brain to grow. And like I said, our brains are very plastic. They have the ability, they're constantly growing over the lifespan. Mm-hmm. So our brain development, for the most part, is done by the time we're in our 30s. But over the course of our entire life, our brain is constantly developing new neural pathways. And doing the difficult things or doing something that sucks or doing things that create mild stress actually enhances our brain's ability to retain information, and then also promotes brain health overall.
Sure. So it doesn't matter really how old you are. You can still benefit from doing the thing that sucks every day.
A good example is our grandparents.
Yeah.
They're in their they're still going to classes every day about these various topics that they find interesting.
Yeah.
Well, why would somebody that's lived a long, fulfilling life want to do that? It's because our brain does crave and does desire to continue learning and developing, and doing the hard things promotes brain health. Well,
that's cool.
And then there's also, of course, the growth mindset. We talked about growth mindset before. Mm-hmm. But what doing the difficult things causes a shift from our brain finding excuses for reasons we can't do things. It shifts our mindset from that to, I can learn to do this. It kind of builds that self-confidence. What are some examples? We all know about Navy SEALs, right?
Getting crazy.
Yeah, they are. But their whole training is focused around deliberate adversity, in intentionally forcing them to do difficult things to kind of overcome that resistance to discomfort. Yeah. And what they find is that, Navy SEALs are obviously amazing individuals, but they've been trained to be able to handle the discomfort without the extra stress of trying to avoid it.
Sure.
That makes
right.
sense.
Yep, it does.
So then the question is, or not the question, but then how do you suppose we start doing something that sucks every day? And I'm not saying we should always be doing things that are difficult. What I am encouraging people to do is start doing one thing that's difficult every day, if you haven't been able to do it before. Mm-hmm. And I encourage people to choose your daily discomfort.
What are some good examples small.
Well, I think you have to start small. If somebody's not used to doing difficult things, for example, if somebody wants to take up running, you're not going to go run a marathon. Running a marathon is a very difficult thing for anybody. You're not going to go from never running a marathon or never running a mile to running a marathon in a day. You have to start small. So you want to start with something small but meaningful. So rather than going for a 12-mile run, if you just want to run around the block, for example.
And that might, and doing something small like that might seem like, oh, this is a waste of time because of course I have all the energy. I have enough energy to run around the block.
Yeah.
But you're that small win. Maybe the next day you go two times around the block. And then because I would assume that if you go too big, too fast, you're not going to be able to reach the end. You'll be like, well, this sucks. I can't do this.
Yeah. But, maybe on a more practical basis, because not all runners, we're not all necessarily into to working out consistently, perhaps. But one of the things that we're all aware of, and as our culture has continued to progress and become more modernized and more convenient, you look at the coming of artificial intelligence.
Right.
For example, all these things are making our lives easier. And what we're finding is the easier our lives get, the less ability we have to focus. Focusing ability is essentially disappearing, because we're no longer required as much to engage in sustained activity or in a sustained task for a period of time. So, choosing the discomfort could mean I'm going to focus on a deep work task for 15 minutes and not focus on anything else, and then take a break. So it's really starting with something really small that's uncomfortable and then slowly expanding on it over time.
I can relate. I can definitely relate to that at work. I mean, there's so much deep work that I have to do, but there's also so many small tasks like, oh, I got to get to the emails, got to get to check my messages, got to make sure that, I do the IT thing for somebody, got to make sure all these little tiny things, they just waste so much time. But then like, times that I do decide to I'm put my foot down, like, well, I'm gonna spend an hour to do some deep work. Oh, it's so invigorating. It's so energizing.
Yeah. But it would also, all those little distractions that you've identified, when we're faced with, for example, the deep work idea and needing to focus our sustained attention on a deep, difficult task for a period of time, our brain is going to automatically look for all the other little things to pop up to kind of to move us away from doing that difficult thing.
Oh, yep.
So the brain's going to naturally be more in tune to that, especially if you're not practiced with it. So that's why, when you choose your discomfort, sometimes choosing your discomfort is as simple as, all right, I'm going to choose to focus on this singular task for 15 to 20 minutes in the absence of all distractions. And as we're talking about, that seems like a very simple thing to do. But if you actually apply yourself to it, it's actually, in today's culture, it's very difficult.
Yep.
The research shows that we pick up our phones hundreds of times a day, and I include myself in that.
Yeah.
And so you'll find if you try to focus on a task for a specific period of time, people have said their hand literally feel twitchy because they feel they have to.
Yeah.
And such an addiction. Phones are great. Our electronic devices are wonderful. They bring so much value to our lives, but they also are a detriment from that standpoint, as we haven't been able to learn to focus. So
they bring too much.
Yeah. And sometimes doing something that sucks means choosing to focus.
Just turning your phone. Try turning your phone off for an hour.
Other example practices of doing something that sucks is some people are taking cold showers, for example. Some people find that beneficial, or doing hard workouts. Social ideas, you've met those people that are great at initiating conversations with others, right?
Right.
And a lot of people are envious of those people that are naturally able to engage with others. People that have that ability because they practice it. They were intentional about practicing interacting with others. And the more and more electronic our culture has become, and the less and less we have become to just interact with people on a person-to-person basis. And so maybe for some people, doing the thing that sucks every day is being intentional about initiating conversations and acknowledging that it's going to be awkward for a period of time.
I have a story about that. As you know, I've been a part of a networking group for many years, and being part of that business, that hustle, so you say is talking to people all the time, just randomly, just being friendly to people, getting used to talking to strangers and that kind of thing. And I'm telling you, man, that is a man and woman maker. I mean, it's hard. I mean, when you choose to be intentional about striking up random conversations with people, it is the most uncomfortable, awkward thing you will ever do. But after you get, 100, 200 reps, or maybe even a couple dozen reps, you start to look forward to it. Your brain rewards you for it. It feels good, and you do get better at it.
Well, the reason it's difficult is because any relationship with another human being, regardless of the depth, requires an element of vulnerability. That is where the resistance comes from. That's our brains perceive that as a risk or a threat to be vulnerable with somebody else. Because if I engage with you in a conversation, I'm putting my good faith in you that you're not going to reject me. You're not going to make fun of me. You're not react harshly, and we're putting all that on the other person. So the vulnerability piece is really what prevents us, a lot of people, from being able to engage with others on that personal level. Our current culture makes it much more difficult we can all hide behind a screen, for example. But that's why I said about that vulnerability piece.
Right. Sure.
So just kind of wrapping it up here, our brain resists discomfort because it thinks it's protecting you. That's why doing the hard things are difficult. And that's why we're very good at avoiding them. However, facing discomfort strengthens our neural pathways. So if we talk about our brain being plastic, it strengthens the pathways, and then it also builds our ability to be resilient, and then it allows our brain to grow over time. Mm-hmm. And then I would encourage you to start with daily practice of doing one thing that sucks every day, because even if it's really small, it then trains your brain to embrace the challenge. And as with anything else, the more we do it, the more we do the hard thing, the easier it becomes over time. So I would encourage people to just embrace the challenge. Pick one sucky thing to do today and then reflect on how it feels.
Brushing your teeth.
No, well, hopefully that's
hopefully it's not a sucky thing people do every day. Hopefully that's not something they have to make.
Hopefully not. It's an example, actually, though. By
or like putting on clothes.
It's very awkward for him to brush his teeth, But over time, like now we brush our teeth, we don't even think about it. Like I couldn't. You would have to think right now if I asked you, did you brush your teeth today? Because your brain just does it automatically. And that's kind of how we can go from something being difficult to something being less difficult to do.
Yeah.
Right now my son complains about brushing his teeth, and it's not because he is trying to be difficult. It's because the task of brushing his teeth is much physically difficult, more hard for him than it is for me. I don't have to think about it. He does. And so the more you practice something, the more you practice doing hard things, the easier it becomes. And the thing is, as kids and as parents in particular, the whole goal of parenting is to teach our kids to do hard things so that they can develop and grow up and do adults. But when we become adults and we can think for ourselves, suddenly we kind of stop doing that.
So that's very interesting. Things. We, as parents, our job is to train kids on how to do hard things or sucky things and just do it, not complain about it, not avoid it. Huh.
So goes with a quote, and I don't remember where it came from. I don't know who quoted it, but comfort is a slow death. Prefer pain.
Ooh. Yeah. Comfort is a slow death. Prefer.
So you have to pick my point is you have to pick your pain.
Yeah.
You're going to either deal with the pain of growth in the moment or the pain of regret later on.
I always, just to kind of wrap that, just to kind of do a little thing for myself, about myself, is I was looking back, I was talking to my mom, or our mom, over the weekend, and we were talking about, kind of end of life stuff, and just kind of, I'm 40 years old now, so I'm pretty old. I'm thinking, if I could go back and do things differently, I would do a lot of things different, because there's a lot of times where I've known, a lot of people say, well, I would never do anything different. I would do a lot of things different.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that there's so many instances where I have, not been consistent and disciplined. I could be further along than I am in many areas. So I do agree with that. I prefer pain over having comfort.
10 years from now, we're all going to be 10 years older, regardless of what we do. So
We all have the same 24. It's a good one.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Non-Static Podcast. If you want to keep the conversation going and explore more ways to find peace, focus, and fulfillment, be sure to sign up for the Non-Static newsletter at nonstatic.org. We've got the link for you in the episode description. And if you or someone you care about is struggling with their mental health, we are here to help. You can connect with us anytime at Inspire Services at inspireservicesllc.com. If you found this episode helpful, take a moment to follow, rate, or leave a quick review. It helps more than you know, and it lets us keep bringing you the content you care about the most. Take care, keep moving forward, and as always, enjoy the journey.